Talking with Jerry.
The last thing we want to cover was the assassination of President Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. I can remember it almost like it was yesterday. I was in school and we started hearing bells ringing. I was attending school in Lower Manhattan, and all of a sudden the nun, I went to Catholic school, went out in the hallway, and she came back and she was just sobbing uncontrollably. And then we heard when she opened the door this crying in the hallway. Within a few minutes, they came in and said school is going to be let out within the next few minutes, and that the priest was going to come in to talk to us. And the priest came in and told us that the president had been assassinated, and that we all had to pray and to head straight home. When I came out of school, my mother had made it downtown already. And I can just remember going in the subway, riding back uptown to Harlem, and seeing grown men and women, just cry, as if they had just lost a parent or a child. It was just very moving. And there were bells ringing all over the city. And by the time I got back uptown, the mood was the same. Harlem back then was 99% black. And coming out of the subway, walking from the subway to my home, just seeing, because all the businesses closed up. So the subway trains were packed, even though it was early in the afternoon, about maybe 1, 2 o'clock, something like that in the afternoon. And the same thing.
Hold on a second. Describe that move for us, because usually when an artist dies, we play their music everywhere. Okay? So JFK just died. Were people reading papers or crying on each other's shoulders? Describe that a little better for us.
Yeah, well, it really was like people crying on people's shoulders. It was people, just weeping uncontrollably. If someone that they knew when they came out of the train station, they recognized someone, they went over and hugged that person. I can remember walking into my apartment building, and, just the lobby of the apartment building by the elevator banks, it's like people just couldn't move. They were just standing there, all talking about what had happened. There were no updates. It was just that the president had been assassinated in Dallas. There was of course, no internet then, and there were only the 3 major television networks. So people who, wanted to run upstairs and see what they interrupted the news. Everybody was watching Walter Cronkite. What was it that happened to the president? And so a big thing then was transistor radios. People had these portable radios, and people that did have one were walking around with the radio next to their ear to try to find out any updated details. But the main thing was that the president was dead, and it would go on to be a solemn weekend for everybody in the country. So.
And that was a couple of days, didn't it? It wasn't just that day.
Oh yeah, because the funeral had to be planned. World leaders had to come from all over the world. There were some controversies, of course, and that's a whole nother story about after he was assassinated, because it was in Dallas, the Dallas police.
First president assassinated in our lifetime.
Right, and the Dallas police didn't want to let his body be released. But once again, you have the federal government over the states, and the Secret Service almost got into fights with the Dallas police and said, we're taking his body and we're taking it now. And so that was a big showdown that happened in Dallas. And then there are some other little known things when they tried to put his casket on the plane, because the the casket couldn't fit through the door. And the Secret Service agents, they're upset. And there's also panic because no one knew whether President Johnson, who was on the plane, whether there was somebody coming to kill him. He was actually scared that he would be assassinated, and then the president and the vice president would be killed. And the secret, someone said, well, the only thing we could do with the casket is put it underneath the plane. And one of the agents, and Jackie Kennedy, his wife, was there crying, and he said, hell no. And they took a saw and they carved off a little fraction of the door to force that casket into the plane. And wow. That's not something you're reading books. You'd have to read a lot of books on the Secret Service and really historians that go into every little detail. So when I tell these stories, not only was I living at that time, this is a book I read. Maybe I'll do something on President Johnson. This book is 600 plus pages, and I've read at least 5 on President Kennedy that were 300 or 400 pages, that these types of information are shared with people who were there over that time period in his presidency or during the assassination or the civil rights movement, these backstories that you don't know. So I just want to close with these words from President Kennedy, which is still relevant today. And you could hear his voice, what a great speaker he was. People say he was one of the greatest speakers as far as a president. I don't even think just in modern history. I mean, we don't know what Abraham Lincoln sounded like. I mean, there were other people who were good speakers, but in my lifetime, all the presidents I've lived through, even though Reagan was an actor, nobody could touch Kennedy, whether it's his inauguration speech where he talked about passing the torch to a new generation, or where he went and talked about we will get to the moon. That's another thing I forgot to mention. He put a black, an African-American Air Force pilot in the space program. President Kennedy created the space program, and he made sure that an African-American was going to go into space. And this is in the 1960s. So he was a great speaker, and let's listen to some closing words as we see his casket and the site where he is buried in Arlington Cemetery.
What kind of peace do we seek? I'm talking about genuine peace, kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living. Not merely peace in our time, peace in all time. Our problems are man-made, therefore they can be solved by man. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal.